right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the training offered by CIRES Communications on how to level up your photography game. So I'm Lauren LaPuma. I'm from the CIRES Comms team. I'm the acting communications director. My experience, I have a lot of experience with photography. I've been a freelance photographer. I've done a lot of photographs of scientists in the field, tagging along with on a lot of research trips and field trips. Done it even down in Antarctica at McMurdo Station. So lots of extreme environments. I've also done a lot of event photography and performance photography. So I'll give you some of my tips from that. And I'm joined today by Kathy Bogan, who I will let her introduce herself, also from the comms team.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you're here. I am a recovering journalist, so that my experience with photography comes from the presentation end of things, which isn't so much creating photos as it is selecting photos and editing photos to tell stories and photos that are going to keep viewers engaged for a long time. So while Lauren's going to talk about the creation of photography, I'm going to talk a little bit about concepts and audience and what's effective.
Awesome. Okay, so here's our agenda. We'll do a short little activity to start us off. Then Kathy will talk about photography concepts. Then we'll go into some technical elements of photography and then how to plan a photo shoot. Talk about editing, and I'll show you guys a little bit of a demo of how to edit some photos, some very common things that you'll often have to deal with in editing photos. Kathy and I will give you our tips for taking great photos, and then we'll do one final activity, and then we will close it out with some resources and Q&A. And we'll do Q&A at the end, but if anyone has any questions in the meantime throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat or use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we'll stop after every section to give you a chance to ask those. So Kathy, Kathy, why don't I kick it over to you to talk about the photo contest that's coming up?
Yeah, I just every 2 years, if you're not familiar, CIRES does a photo contest, and we get some absolutely terrific images of all kinds. The images, the contest gets judged in January, but we open it for entries in the fall. Uh, the winning images, we make very high quality reproductions that we hang in the CIRES admin hall in Eckley for 2 years. And then they go to the photographer. So there's a prize involved, a beautiful reproduction of your image if you win. There's a general category that includes landscapes and animals and things like that. But every year we encourage people to send imagery of their science in action. We really want photos of your science at work. And you can see past winners, if you don't already know them, at the website indicated, or just Google CIRES Photo Contest. So once again, the photo contest will be open this fall. It closes at the end of December. Then we judge and award the winners. We typically get about 250 to 300 entries, and it's open to people who work at CIRES. That includes people who work with NOAA, people who work in any part of CIRES. So we encourage you to submit your images. Okay.
All right, so now we're gonna start with a fun activity, or at least I think it's fun. So I'm gonna show you guys some images, some photos on the next screen, and I want you all to either in the chat or coming off mute, look at these photos and just make up a story about what's going on in these photos. It can be crazy, it can be fictional, it can be what you really think is happening in the photo. Just make up any kind of story about what you think this photo is telling. So I have four options here. You can pick one photo, or you can combine them all into one story for all four of them, or for two out of the four, whatever you prefer. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to take a look, and then just drop your ideas in the chat. Yes, Mariama. Help! I'm giving you no context as to what these photos are or where they were taken. Aaron, that's great. I really love that. Mariama, you are actually very close to the truth on that one. You guys are great. I love this. I'll give you another minute or so. Anyone want to come off mute and talk about what they see in these photos? Feel free to do so. All right. Well, I'm not going to give you any more context. I just want you all to have fun with these and enjoy and get excited for photography. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to talk about some concepts.
Yeah, so we started out with the idea of storytelling. And let me make sure I can control. Here we go. I picked out some photos that address sort of general principles of photography, fairly technical, but they're also storytelling photos. So, light, of course, is a huge one that's part of photography, and this is light in Syria. And this is actually a photo of people at war in Syria, and amazing, amazing light where the photographer had the presence of mind to be taking a picture with these bullet holes showing light through the what is that, corrugated iron there. Another principle, uh, moments. Photographs capture moments, and that was a big thing that we would look for when I was working at newspapers. This is a moment in Ukraine, uh, and there's a lot to unpack in this photo. The way the lines work, you can see lines of the place set, you can see lines of the fence, you can see the swing ropes crossed, and this is actually a story about a young girl who lost her eyes during the war in Ukraine, and the kind of treatment that she was getting. Photo by Lindsay Addario, who's a very famous journalistic photographer, and just saw her just having this wonderful moment in the playground. And the one of the details of this is that her eyes are obscured, which is part of the story. You don't necessarily know that to begin with, but the photo itself is really evocative. How do you tell a story about COVID? There were so many pictures of COVID. Here's one. Picture in your mind, what's this going to look like? And so what we see is people in protective equipment hugging each other, uh, who are actually mourning the passing of one of their relatives from the disease. Uh, Another thing to do, changing your point of view, here's a critter, getting way close up to a critter. So what's this going to look like? Uh, it's it's a bug on a flower. Amazing focus on this, and you can practically see all the little pixels in the eyes and things, and just a lot of sense of humor in this one. So the opposite, of course, of getting up close is getting far away. So here's an image of Iceland. So picture in your mind, what is this going to look like? And it's actually a drone shot of a lava flow uh, engulfing the landscape and the highway in Iceland. Beautiful colors, red and blue and orange contrast. Uh, it's very abstract, but it's also very moving because of the subject matter. That's a moment. Looking for patterns in what you see out there. and this is another photo of more critters. What do you see that's making a pattern in the world? Great black and white picture of cheetahs eating up their kill, also taken from above. You have patterns within the coats of the cheetahs, but you also have a pattern in the arrangement of the bodies of the cheetahs that makes a kind of star shape that's emphasized again by the positioning of the legs of the antelope that they're having their meal made out of. Okay, more critters, seeing the big picture. This is a little different from the insect and the cheetahs that we've just seen. And here you're seeing the landscape as much as seeing the animals that are in it. Way far away, patterns, repetition, rhythm that makes this into a really interesting photograph. There's also a sense of scale. So, um, and one more critter story. This is all about storytelling, and this actually comes from one of our series photo contests photograph. This image, when I first saw it, I was like, well, this is really chaotic. I didn't quite know what's going on here. Is it a selfie? What is it? And actually, there's a critter in this photo. Some of you have seen it before, I think, but it's one of our researchers in a treetop research station, and he was visited by a snake in the treetop station. And look around, see if you can find the snake. It's right there. So, um, kind of a chaotic picture that has a story attached and some fun about, well, fun as long as you're not up there with a snake. But yeah. Okay. Other inspiration, these are, you can go to the Pulitzer Prize site, prize winners by category. That will give you some amazing journalistic photographs. World Nature Photography Awards, also very inspiring. Sony World Photography Awards. These are all really great for inspiration. And Lauren also pointed out Expose DC. What's that all about?
Yeah, this is a photography group based in Washington, D.C., and they have a photo contest every year. And I always feel so humbled when I see their winning photographs. So, highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. So now that we've kind of talked about storytelling and concepts, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about technical elements of photography. So, as Kathy kind of mentioned, everything in your photo, you always have to have a subject. There's always a subject, and you need to kind of think about ahead of time what your subject is. Is it a person? Is it a landscape? Is it multiple people? Is it an animal? Who or what is the subject? Sometimes you might look at a photo and think it's really chaotic, and you can't tell what you're looking at or what you should be looking at. Like, what am I supposed to notice about this photo? So keep that in mind when you're taking a photo. What exactly is your subject? And again, what is the story that your photo is telling? Or what concept is it conveying? What is it showing? Is it showing what kind of science is it showing? What about the science is it showing? Those are all really important things to keep in mind. Composition, which we'll talk about in a little more detail. Composition is basically just how the elements, that's your subject, background, etc., how they are all arranged physically within the frame of your photograph. And so the goal is to have your elements arranged in a way that's pleasing to the eye and that keeps the viewer looking at your photo for a long time, keeps them interested. Again, Kathy talked about light and then by extension, color. So, what is the direction and intensity of your light source? How does that play into color and the mood or the emotion of the photograph? How does it change what you're trying to convey? And then the most difficult element of photography is timing. So timing is just taking the photo when the elements are best arranged to convey your message. And it's difficult if you think about trying to photograph lightning or wildlife, or sports. It's really, it's hard, but you have to end up practicing a lot and just taking so many photos of the same thing until you get that one that is just perfect. So just things to think about and try to really optimize when you're taking photographs. So I know before we get into more technical elements and tips and all that, everything that we're going to talk about here, these are all just guidelines. They are not hard and fast rules, because pretty much anything can be an artistic choice, so whatever your choice is, stand by it, make it. These are all just kind of guides and tips. They're not rules. The other thing is a lot of this all depends on what you're shooting. So just think about that and take it with a grain of salt. So when we talk about composition, the most basic rule of composition is the rule of thirds. And so this is basically if you were to think about the frame of your photograph and divide it up into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, you want to place your subject or the interesting elements of your photos at the intersection of those lines. So here's a photo by Steph Malterich, who's also on the CIRES Comms team, of this researcher in the field looking at a grasshopper in this little vial. And so the person's head and face is just about at the intersection of this corner right here in the top. So that's a really great placement. This is kind of where our eyes go in the photo. They go to these like kind of intersections of these lines. So think about trying to place your subjects there. But again, if you want to place your subject smack in the middle of the photo and that is your artistic choice, that's fine. Do it. Um, when you're talking about light and color, are there any ways you can, amp up the color in a photo, make the color more interesting, use the light to make a more interesting photo? On the left here, these are just some sunflowers that I bought at the store, but I really wanted to photograph them and highlight the yellow, pull out that yellow orange of the flowers. So I put them against this blue background, which is complementary to the orange yellow. So that helps pop and make them stand out a little bit more. This photo in the middle is from an observation tube down in Antarctica at McMurdo Station that goes below the sea ice, so you can observe seals and other animals swimming around. And so the tube is actually green, but on the bottom half of the lid was kind of some red paint. So when it was shut, the red paint, the light kind of created this red pink effect. Throughout to this telescoping effect throughout the tube. So it just kind of changed the whole color of it, made it kind of interesting. And then on the right here, this is just a glacier and some folks standing on top of it. And by this, I just want to show that color can help set a mood or talk about your scene and your setting. Ice is cold, so they're in a very cold place, and the blue color of the ice really helps to bring out that sense of coldness. So I'll get into a little bit of camera specs and camera settings now. Not too much detail because we don't have that much time, but a little bit to help you improve your photography skills. And my tip is if you have a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera, read your camera's manual. I know you're all going to say, Lauren, that's so dumb. I'm not going to do it. It's like 200 pages long. It's so boring, but it actually is really, really helpful. It will explain a lot of these settings and concepts in detail. It will give you like a really good idea of how to use your camera in the best way possible. So I highly recommend doing that. So the three main settings that we like to really use in photography are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. So, and these are called like the exposure triangle. You'll see them called like that quite a bit because these three things control the exposure and the light of your photo and how it's going to look. So your shutter speed is just how long the shutter actually opens for in terms of time. So it's basically how crisp or how blurry your photo is. So obviously the longer it's open, the more blurry it is. The shorter that it's open, the more crisp your photo will be. And so a good example of this would be if you're photographing water, a short shutter speed or a fast shutter speed will give you a crisp photo where you can see each droplet. A blurry photo with your shutters open for a long time will give you that flowy, beautiful effect of flowing water. Aperture is actually how wide your lens opens up. And so a wider aperture will give you more light. It will also give you a shallower depth of field, meaning only a small part of your photograph will be in focus. A smaller aperture, by the way, decreases the amount of light that goes in, but gives you a telescoping effect, so you have a much deeper depth of field, so more of your photo is in focus. And I'll talk about how to use these in just a minute. And then ISO is basically how sensitive your camera is to light. So you can increase the ISO to make your camera more sensitive to light if you're in a low light situation, like indoors and it's dark out or it's dark in the room. But the problem is the higher up your ISO goes, the more noisy your photo gets. And that's where you have that like kind of that grainy look with lots kind of pixelated. And so no, so it gets very noisy, and that's never a good thing. You never want a noisy photo. So my tip is to actually, if you're using a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, set a max ISO. I usually set my max at like 1600 or 3200, and that way it never goes above that. So I know my photo's never going to be noisier than that. But that means that sometimes there might not be enough light to take the photo, and that's okay. I'd rather have no photo than a noisy photo.
Hey, Lauren,
Yeah.
question. What's a mirrorless camera?
Oh, I will get to that in the next slide, Mariama. So hang on. Um, so most of the time, where you're going to want to be when you're taking photographs is here. You want a short, fast shutter speed. You want a large aperture and a low ISO. Now, again, it all depends on what you're shooting, and it depends on how much light is available. But normally, a great photographs have a large aperture, so they have a shallower depth of field that gives you that nice background blur. It gives you a really nice effect. It draws your eye to the subject really well. It blurs out any distracting elements in the background. So normally, you want to get a lens or have a camera with a lens that has as large aperture as you can get. But again, it depends on what you're shooting. If you're shooting a landscape, you probably want the whole thing to be in focus, so you want that deep depth of field. So you would make your aperture smaller. And again, like if you're shooting sports, you want that crisp, fast shutter speed to capture that motion. But again, if you're shooting water or if you're shooting stars at night, you might want a large shutter speed to let enough light come in. But most of the time, this is where you want to be. So, different kinds of cameras. So, in terms of digital cameras, there's DSLRs, which is digital single lens reflex, and a mirrorless camera. And they're very similar. They're just both big digital cameras. The main difference is in the viewfinder. So this means for a DSLR, it has what's called, it has a mirror. And so the mirror takes the light that comes in through the shutter and bounces it up to the viewfinder. So what you see through the viewfinder is exactly what will go onto the image or onto the image sensor. Mirrorless cameras do this don't have a mirror. And so that means that what you see in the viewfinder is a little bit different. It's not exactly the same composition as your photograph will be. In the end, the difference is very small. It doesn't really matter so much. But the main thing about having a mirrorless camera is that they're lighter and they can take faster bursts of photos. Because with a DSLR, the mirror has to move up out of the way in order to take the photo. So you can take a little bit faster photos. But again, these differences are very minor these days. They're, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. Choose what you like. Most people are kind of moving towards mirrorless these days, but either kind is fine. I use both. Like my personal camera is a DSLR, our CIRES camera is a mirrorless. And the main thing about these two kinds of cameras is you have full control over all the settings. Everything you can choose the focal points, like many different kinds of focal points. You can choose, how it meters the light. You can switch out all of your lenses. I'm not going to talk about lenses too much here, but if anyone wants to geek out over lenses, let me know. I'm happy to talk about them. And you still have a really good quality photo when you zoom in, as long as your aperture is wide enough. Smartphones, on the other hand, so smartphones also take great photos. And so if all you've got is a smartphone, that's great. Use it. Don't feel like you can't use it to take great photos. Some of my favorite photos I've taken have been with a smartphone. But again, you can't control all the settings that you can. However, there are now things you can control. So most smartphones now have several lens options, which means they also have a portrait mode. So you can get a shallow depth of field with the portrait mode, whereas before you couldn't. And now sometimes you have a wide angle and a narrower angle, so you can definitely take different types of photos. And you can actually control the exposure and the focal point too in a smartphone by just basically tapping on the screen. And I'm happy to show people that if they want. But the thing about smartphones is that when you zoom in, it actually degrades the quality. So I try not to zoom too much on a smartphone. But I actually find smartphones do better when shooting cloudy skies. On a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, this cloudy sky often gets blown out and it's just white. But I find smartphones pick up that difference, the difference in the lights of the clouds much better. So, how to plan a photo shoot. So, if you're going out in the field, or you're going in the lab, or you're going to shoot Colorado wildflowers, whatever it is, if you want to know, okay, how do I plan this out? Here's some tips for you. The best thing to do, the first thing you should do is make a shot list. So this is just a list of all the different kinds of shots that you want to capture. So think about what photos you want or need to tell the story of this event or this field trip, whatever the science, whatever it is, what you need to illustrate the work properly to tell all the different aspects of it and all of the different angles. So if I were going out in the field with some researchers, I would think, okay, maybe they were at a field camp in Alaska or something. I would say, all right, maybe I want a wide shot of the whole camp with some landscape features in the background. Maybe I want some close-ups of the researchers actually doing their work, of them working with particular instruments, digging holes or setting up their tents, whatever it is. So I would just write down all these kinds of shots that I want to get to have them in my mind while I'm out there shooting. And try to get a variety of different types of shots. Get wide shots, get close-up shots, get medium shots, get all different kinds, play around with angles so that your shots don't all look the same. You may need to scout your location ahead of time if you've never been there, or if you can get there, if you're able to get there ahead of time. See what it looks like. What is the setup? How much light is available? Are there any physical obstacles in your way, that you have to move around or work around while you're there? Is the space only available at a certain time? When can you get there? Do you need permission to get there? What's the best time of day to be there? Um, You'll hear photographers talk sometimes about golden hour or magic hour. This is just the time of day when it's like early morning or late afternoon when the sun is low in the sky, and that creates a really beautiful lighting situation. So this GIF up at the top is just from Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, when Titus is really upset that he wants to go photograph himself and it's magic hour, but he can't because he's stuck pretending to be a handyman. Those are so early in the morning and end of the day are really great times to take photographs outside. Middle of the day when the sun's overhead is great, but if that's all you got, then that's all you got. And then think about any equipment you might need to bring with you. Like, do you need lighting? Do you need reflectors to reflect that light? Do you need any additional lenses? Do you need a tripod, etc.? You can buy them, or you can actually rent all of these things. I've rented them before. Here's a couple sites that you can use. You can rent a lens for a week or a couple of days. It's really not that expensive. It's super easy to do. They send you a package with the lens and they send you a return shipping label. They make it really easy. So I highly recommend checking it out. If you're going somewhere really cold, like if you're doing field work in Greenland or Antarctica, bring lots of extra batteries. The cold is going to drain your batteries really quickly. So keep them close to your body to keep them warm. I usually keep them out of the camera until I'm ready to use them. And then I throw them in. And think about, do you need to stage a scene? Sometimes you're in a space where there's a lot of distracting elements or it's very busy or cluttered. For example, this lab here on the right. There's tons of vials here, there's wires hanging down everywhere. It's not an ideal location for photography because there's just so many elements that are distracting from what you're trying to shoot. So is there any way you can clean it up or remove some of those distracting elements? Can you add color? A lot of lab spaces are very bland and the lighting isn't really great, so can you add color somehow by putting up colorful posters or maybe changing out the wardrobe of the folks who are in the photos, give them some like bright colors to wear? That's a very common thing. So think about how you can make the setting look a little bit better. And when you're doing a photo shoot, some lighting tips here. So you may need to add light, redirect the light. If the sun is behind the subject, it'll feel like you're shooting them against the setting sun, but you can't get any light in their face, use a reflector. Those car sunshades for your windshield are great reflectors, and they're cheap and easy to use. You can bounce it off also to make the light softer. So ideally, you would want the light source close to you and behind you as the photographer so that it shines right on the subject, but you can't always control that. And again, it may not be what you want. If you want your subject to be backlit and you have like a silhouette effect, that's fine if that's your artistic choice. Like I said, overhead lighting isn't great, but if it's all you have, that's what you got to work with. It's better when the light is close to you, kind of eye level. And if you're outdoors, try using open shade as opposed to being in direct sunlight. So this just creates a little bit more even lighting on your face. So here in the top is this young girl. She's in direct sunlight, so you can see one side of her face is really bright, the other is more dark. But if you bring her and put her in open shade, now the light is more even on her face. You can see her a little better.
Are there any questions so far? Tom pointed out that lensrentals.com and borrowlenses.com are merged. So
Oh,
they're,
thanks.
yeah, they're all one company now.
That's great to know.
Anybody want to throw something in the chat or raise your hand? Ask any tech questions. So Aaron says one of the example photos I showed had light source behind sheet metal, yet the people in the foreground are not washed out by the bright light through bullet holes. How did the photographer do this? Uh, my guess, had not having been there, would be he observed that and then was able to shoot that. I don't know exactly.
Oh, Kathy, you have a question about lens flare. So there's lens flare, and it's hard to explain. I'll see if I can find an example to show all of you who aren't sure what it is. It's when the light hits the lens, like a beam of light hits the lens directly and creates this like kind of flare effect. A couple ways, Kathy. You can use a lens hood. That really helps. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or just move and reposition yourself so the light isn't hitting that lens directly. This happens a lot when you have a bright sun or a really bright light source. And I'll try to find an example for you guys. Or you can lean into it and just use it as part of your artistic choice. But a lens hood will really help. So with editing photos, there's a lot that you can edit afterwards in either Photoshop or Lightroom or any other photo editing program. So if your photo isn't perfect, that's okay. There's things you can change. Um, so I typically use Lightroom because I'm just usually doing basic corrections. I might correct the exposure, the contrast, the white balance, which I'll show you guys. Photoshop is I'm more reserved for like heavy editing. Like if I'm going to remove the background and pull the subject out of a photo or make a composite image where you take a bunch of images together and kind of layer them. But for just basic corrections, Lightroom is really easy. It's basically like a digital darkroom. It allows you, and you can batch edit photos in Lightroom. You can copy and paste edit settings. So if you have a lot of photos of the same person in the same setting, you can just copy and paste all your settings to all your photos, so you don't have to do it one by one. And I'll show you guys a demo in just a minute. But just things that, just so you know, there are some things that are really easy to correct after you're done shooting. You can correct the color, you can correct the exposure, but you can't really reverse engineer a bad photo. You can't, if it's really blurry, like if you were moving or, and your shutter was open for a long time, you can't really correct that. I mean, you can a little bit, but not very well. It's hard to correct noise, although the software is better at removing noise now, but it's better to start off with a less noisy photo. So before we go into captions, I will show you guys a little demo. So I'm going to stop sharing really quick and then reshare in Lightroom. So Lightroom is an Adobe product. It's a little bit bigger. So let's go to the beginning here. All right, so here are just some photos I chose and some examples of how I might edit them or what I might want to edit them in there. So when you go into Lightroom, you have a film strip down here that shows you all your photos that you're looking at right now. You can create different albums. You can see on the left here, I've got lots of different albums. Got one of my dog, one for this demo today, one for events, other things that I've shot in the past. So that's your albums on the left. On the right bottom, you have your film strip of all of your photos here. And then you have your actual photo that you're working on right in the middle. Then on the right, you have a bunch of different ways to adjust the photo. So here, we're going to look at first adjusting some basic settings, light, color, you can add some effects, some detail. So for this is a photo of cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. from 7 or 8 years ago that I took. It was early in the day, so I tried to capture that golden hour time, but didn't quite get it. So you can see here, the sky is kind of blown out a little bit. It's very bright. So if I were to fix that, I would take the highlights. So the highlights are the very bright portions of your photo. The shadows are the very dark portions. So I might bring down the highlights, and now you can see the sky is a little bit less blown out. But the whole photo still is a little bit dark, so maybe I'd play with a little bit of maybe I'd bring up the shadows, decrease the shadows a little bit. It's a little bit better. Here's another photo where the sky is kind of blown out. These are the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur. So really cool patterns on this metal interesting angle. I was like very close up underneath, shooting up. Again, the sky's kind of blown out, so I might decrease the highlights a little. That does help a little bit, but not a ton because there were a lot of clouds. Maybe I'd increase the shadows. Or if I just double click, it'll go back to where it was. Maybe I want to do the opposite. Maybe I want to increase the contrast, and that will increase the light distance between your dark and your light photos. Maybe I want to really bring out that pattern and that texture from the metal. So I would increase the contrast. If you go down here to effects, you can increase the clarity. That also has a similar effect. So now the sky is kind of still white behind it, but maybe that's the look I'm going for. Maybe I just want to focus on pulling out the metal of the building. Here's another,
Question
yeah.
about, does this also work to edit film scans?
Not Lightroom. You can only do still images, unless, so I'm not sure what you mean by film scans. Like footage? Sorry, I can't see the chat. Hold on.
Yeah, like 35 millimeter.
This is only for, well, if you looked at each frame, then you could do it for sure. But you'd probably use a different program for film or for moving images. You'd use either Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. Um, so happy to talk about that later if you want to. But Lightroom is really just for still images. Um, So here's a photo. Here's kind of a textury photo that I took of these cliffs in Australia. And so one thing, and Kathy talked about earlier, looking for patterns and things. A good way to do that also is to put the photo in black and white. And so up here in Lightroom, you can just hit here B&W, and now it puts it in black and white. And that might make things more obvious to you. So try checking it out. So if I go to black and white here, so if I go back to the way it was before, oops, sorry. It's fine. It's okay, photo. It's not great. It's kind of blah. If I put it in black and white, okay, it's kind of more interesting. But what I really want to do here um, is up the contrast. So if I up the contrast, then all of a sudden, all of this texture starts to pop out of these rocks and gets a little bit more interesting. And I could even do more with this, but I kind of liked the way that looked with the white sky background, and you can see the texture of the rocks really clearly. Here's a few images of a performer at a show. She's at a stand-up show. Um, and so you can see here the light, she looks fine. It's a little bit dark because it was very dark in there, but the lighting on her is a little bit different. Like here, she's like very kind of pink and rosy. Here, she's a little bit more blue, white. So maybe I would adjust the white balance on this photo. And you just go down here to color. So maybe I would move this slider up here. And so now if I compare this to this, it's a little more similar. Uh, and maybe I would move this down a little bit. So now she looks the same in kind of each photo. Here's a photo where I took, oh no, there's these little spots on my image sensor or on my lens. And I'm like, oh no, I want to get rid of these. So I would go over here in Lightroom to this little eraser tool. And all you do is click on it and it goes away. Boom, super easy. If I have another one, oh, here too, look, oh no, it's gone. So you can adjust the size of this little circle, this eraser tool. Um, Easy to do. Here's a group photo from of the Seco folks, the polar early career folks. You can see it's super dark, kind of hard to see their faces. So, oh, looks like my clone stamp tool got in there too. How do I remove that? Well, we'll come back to that. Anyway, so maybe I would uh, make up the exposure a little bit, but that kind of blows out the sky. So maybe I would decrease the highlights a little bit. Maybe adjust the color a little bit. Eh, it's not the greatest photo, but anyway, there's just a couple examples. Um, Here's a photo of Union Station in Denver that's super bright, so maybe I would decrease the exposure a little bit to pull out the color. You can see the red colors of the letters and the blue sky. Maybe I'd increase the clarity a little bit. Maybe I add a vignette. So that's just when you darken the corners of your image and it kind of brings your focus to the center and removes some of those makes it harder to look at the distracting elements in the corners. So those are just a couple of quick examples. Does anyone have any questions about that or anything else so far before we go back to the presentation?
Allie's asking about Apple Photos versus Lightroom.
I don't really use Apple Photos that much, honestly. I use Lightroom.
Also, Google Photos.
Mm,
So any of those other programs have you used?
I have not for editing photos. For like just storing photos, yes, I have not used them for editing.
Okay. The other thing about editing is attach your captions because we have thousands and thousands of photos in our photo library for series, and some of them are useless because we don't know who it is, we don't know where it is, we don't know when it is, etc. And you will save yourself hundreds of headaches if you caption your photos right away, you attach your captions to your photos, and you keep them there. So strongly encourage you to do that. It's something people often put off, and that's a really good way to shoot yourself in the foot. So. Erin has a question. Do you talk about tripods or how to anchor your camera for slow shutter speeds?
Oh, I didn't talk about that, but yes, if you're shooting a slow shutter speed, like if you're shooting water or stars or the Milky Way, you 1000% want a tripod or a monopod, but mostly tripod. Yeah, you want a tripod because any type of movement when your shutter is open that long is going to blur your photo. So yes, use a tripod. And it doesn't have to be a great tripod. It can be crappy, but use a tripod.
If you're shooting in your lab, we have a tripod in the comms office and you're welcome to come borrow it. So just let us know if you need it.
Most of the time, if your shutter speed is fast enough, uh, you don't need one, but it's never a bad idea to have it. I don't use a tripod very frequently, but yeah. All right, and then we'll just show you guys some. Well, Kathy and I will share just some of our personal tips for great photos, and then we'll do round out with one final little fun activity, and then we'll go to questions. So, if you're unsure of where to focus, so on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, your camera will give you the option of choosing a focal point or multiple focal points, and you can choose it like all throughout the frame of the shot. If you're not really sure where you should be focusing, if you're shooting a person or an animal, focus on their face or their eye, depending on how close you are to them. If you're super close up, use their eye. If you're further away, use their face. But again, play around with it. Play with different angles. Play with your focal point. Try different things. Play with your depth of field. See what looks really good. Um, these are two photos that I took at the National Zoo of a mama orangutan and her baby. And so the first photo on the left, I was focusing on their faces pretty much and how they're like cuddling together. But then I noticed that the mama had her foot wrapped around the baby's foot. So I just changed my focal point to focus on that. And so now you can see their little baby feet wrapped together. If you're shooting a landscape, sometimes including a person will help make the photo a little bit more interesting. So on the left is just a random beach. This is in San Diego. On the right, I had my friend stand in front of me and it makes it a little bit more interesting when there's a person. But again, it all depends on what you're going for and what you're shooting. Try to really show action as much as you can, especially with science where you're just maybe at a computer or working on writing in a notebook or whatever it is. Like try to get expression and action as much as you can. Show emotion, people's faces, like really get up in there. And Kathy talked about showing scale earlier too. That's really helpful to show the size of things. Like this big drill, putting it next to the people shows how big it is. This on the right is Haystack Rock in Oregon. It's like this big prominent geological feature. Without these people in the foreground, you can't really tell how large it is. You can see that it's big, but you're like, how big? But now you can tell just how big it is compared to those people. And my favorite tip is to embrace intimacy. Get close, get up in there. It may feel really weird at first, but just do it. Nick Nichols, a wildlife photographer, he always says, if you're trying to tell a story, you really need some intimacy. So don't be afraid of it. And think about ways you can draw the viewer's eye to your subject. So you can try framing, which is where you use an actual physical frame in your photo. So here, the door to this airplane is the frame of the people who are inside of it. Doors, windows all work really well for framing. Try shooting with something in the foreground. So here, like these icicles are hanging down in front of this researcher's face. You can try a vignette, which I showed you earlier. So that's just darkening or lightening the corners of a photo. This helps draw your eye to the subject, especially if your background is very busy. Um, these photos also show how to use leading lines. So leading lines is just using any kind of line in your scenery to draw that draws your eye to the subject. So here, the line of this fence really draws your eye to the two people sitting there. Again, try using the rule of thirds, using a shallow depth of field to draw your focus to the subject by blurring out everything you don't want. Try playing around with your focal point as well. And Kathy.
Yeah, a lot of times we get invited to take pictures of events and other things like that, that there might not be a lot of action going on. So generally speaking, an image of people looking at computers or speaking at podiums aren't really terrific photo materials, so you have to get creative with it. So once again, back to web search for how to take a good photo of a speaker at a podium, and you'll get a bunch of ideas there. But there's other ways to do it, and that's arriving at an event, in particular, arriving early, catching the interaction, catching the setup, capturing some of the materials, and at the end of the event, also hanging around and getting some more interactions and things. And that way you can get kind of the flavor of an event in a different way than just a talking head behind a podium. Cropping aggressively. But first, think about how you're framing your photo. Sometimes you can grab a detail out of a picture uh, that wasn't that interesting to begin with, but if you crop it really tightly, uh, it can help. Speakers waiting for them to move their hands around or watching them for getting a little bit of emotion going. If you look at photos of politicians, that's often what the photographers will be going for, and then using the other tips that both Lauren and I have given on making photographs interesting, colors, patterns, etc. So here are some examples.
Yeah, so these are examples I took from two events earlier this year. So yeah, getting people interacting, using their hands, being expressive, all really helps. And a lot of these rooms for a conference, especially for a conference or a meeting, the rooms are super bland. They're like beige or white. There's not much interesting to look at. So try to either blur the background or get really close in on the people, or you can try really trying to get some color in there. So here, these two events on the left, like this guy was wearing a red shirt, so I wanted to focus in on him and kind of this line of these three guys in a row to add a little bit of texture to it. Down on the
Lauren,
left, sorry,
do you want to go back one too?
sure.
Sorry. Just the thing that Lauren was talking about leading lines, if you look not just at the figures in these photographs, but you look at the background and the way the lines work on the blurry part or the in focus part, that's all part of making the picture more interesting. So sorry, just want to throw that in.
Yeah, no, thanks for adding that, Gabby. So yeah, anytime you can add color, especially red is really great. Down here on the bottom left, this girl was wearing a red shirt, so I tried to get her shirt in there as much as possible. Up here on the right, this was the fire weather test bed at NOAA that was held last year, and they had these gorgeous images colored red and orange of these fire simulations. So I really tried to include that background in the photos where I could to make it a little bit more interesting. Down here on the right, these folks were using sticky notes. So the color of the sticky notes helps, and it really kind of shows them interacting with each other, trying to get them to be as expressive, different levels. So some folks are standing, some are sitting. That also helps too. Again, like Kathy said, cropping really aggressively helps your composition because this guy, his face, his eyes are right about that upper right third quadrant intersection there. All right, so that's pretty much the end of our presentation. What we wanted to do now is just show you all some photos. We're not going to say if they're good or bad. We're not going to say who took them or anything. We want you just to look at the photos and then tell us what you think works about them, what doesn't work, could they be improved, or are they perfect? Is there nothing to improve upon? You can just throw it in the chat. You can come off mute and talk if you want to. Um, I can start us off. This is a photo that I chose. It's not mine, but I love this photo. I think it's maybe one of the most technically perfect photos I've ever seen. You've got the rule of thirds going on. You've got this woman here, right here on this left third, and top. Her face is about the top third. She's in the foreground. The light on her is great. You've got stuff in the midground, in the background. You've got so much moving in here. But the mist of this water kind of creates a blurring effect, so it's not too distracting, but you can still see what's happening. I really love this photo.
So this is just sort of open conversation,
Yeah,
and we can keep moving through the images, but feel free to unmute and comment on what you think is effective or not, because we haven't added all images that we think are terrific.
yeah. Oh, Aaron, yeah. So photos on camera relative to the scene. Think about what point of view you want. Like, if you are at the point of view of the audience member, maybe you want to be like at high level, or maybe at the mezzanine, or maybe you want to give the point of view of a shorter person, so you're going to shoot up. I mean, it really depends on what you want. And try different things. Try all of those things. Go up, go below, see what looks good. Get a bird's eye view, get like a bug's eye view. Try it all. Yeah, and again, yeah, it depends on what you want to shoot. Do you want to see the crowd, or do you want to get a close up of the musicians themselves? How high up is the stage? I'll just kind of scroll through these photos and feel free to comment on them as much as you like.
This was one of the ones that won one of the field research photos for the previous photo contest. So the judges loved the colors, they loved the composition, the pattern. It just is really evocative, and you can see it in real life in the CIRES admin hall. Kathy, your question is, was that planned? Uh, I don't know, but I assume. I mean, knowing in advance what you want to get, I think that didn't just happen.
I like this photo because it shows a reflection. Yeah, I love the colors too. And like normally when you get reflection photos, it's like a mountain lake or something in a landscape in nature. And this is that concept but applied to a cityscape. So I like that about it.
Is that from that DC site?
Yeah, this is from Exposed DC. This is one of their winners.
Yeah, I threw this in because my friend who lives in Wyoming sent me this picture, just, texting back and forth. And I thought it was really cool the way, even though it's not really sharp, it's cool the way the light reflects off the horse's hide. And so just to talk about cropping, what makes a picture? Do you want that whole big dark area in the foreground? Depends on what you're going for. Do you want to really focus on the horse? So fooling around with cropping is always an interesting exercise uh, to do.
Here's some researchers working at a NOAA lab.
What do you think about this picture? Anybody have a thought? Hard to know where my eyes should go. Is it staged? Yeah, a couple of good questions there. I think there's some positive things, and there's some things that maybe could have uh, been worked on a little.
Yeah, yeah, what is the focus? Is it the electronics? Is it the people?
Typically, when I'm looking for photos for our publications, I really don't want to print pictures of people's backs because I think that they kind of shut the viewer out of the photo. Here, I think there's just enough of an angle that we can see the profile and the gesture toward the computer, but ideally, it's not. I don't know if it's staged or not, but if it were, you would ask the man on the left to kind of turn a little bit more so you could see him.
Yeah. Or maybe I would maybe switch out their shirts for something a little bit in like a warmer color palette to give it a little bit more color and depth. Because
Lauren always goes places with a red shirt in her car so she can swap them out.
red, it works, man. Red works.
Yeah, well, Erin says the shirt is wrinkled, showing realism.
Yeah. True. I really love this photo. I love the pattern of the girls. I love the realism of them drinking, them hiking. I love a lot of it. The symmetry, exactly. Symmetry is a great thing to do and to incorporate into photography. Is there more? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, so here's another field photo, not holding it up as any sort of perfect photo, but what angle do you get at? Do you get down a little lower than the researchers, above them? We talked about that a little. There's these little touches of color. This is backlit, so is that okay? If we're not IDing everybody in the photo, is that okay? I mean, it's all questions going forward. So if it keeps you looking, that's a plus.
This is photos of the greenhouse gas monitoring or analysis lab at NOAA. So these are all flasks with air samples in them. And that's it. All right. Well, just to close out, we have some more resources for you. Besides everything that we've said before, if you want to buy photo equipment, here are two good sites. Photoguild.org has a lot more resources you can go to. If anyone's interested in doing a photo walk around Boulder with me and Kathy, where we just go and take photos of stuff and play around with all this, let us know. We're happy to put that together. And then here are these two photographers I follow on YouTube that I think do a really great job of. They're great photographers and they do great tutorials and how to take great photos. So feel free to check them out. And with that, we're kind of running out on time, but another plug for the photo contest, and then let us know what questions you have.
Thanks everyone for coming. I'll stay on chat for a minute if you want to ask anything. And yeah, we'll be talking.
Yeah.
Oh, the two
Oh,
guys.
Kathy, I will send you all the slides so you can I'll send everyone the slides so you can have them.